So the Brazilian Grand Prix is coming up this weekend, the home race of who I believe is the greatest Formula 1 driver of all time, none other than Ayrton Senna. Now, I could go into the reasons why I think Senna is the best of all time, but that's another video for another day. But I wanted to take a look at some of the most iconic moments from Senna's career. Now, there's so many to choose from, so to narrow it down to just 5 is really difficult. But these 5 for me highlight different aspects of what made Senna so great in Formula 1. So let's dive in, guys. Here are 5 unforgettable, iconic, legendary moments from the late great Ayrton Senna in Formula 1. So in 1988, Ayrton Senna moved to McLaren, and the McLaren team produced arguably the best Formula 1 car of all time. In fact, its win percentage has only just been broken by Red Bull Racing last year, and that is of course the MP44, which Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost both battled for the 1988 World Championship in. Ayrton Senna's qualifying laps are nothing short of legendary. Anybody who's seen onboard footage of Senna qualifying in Formula 1 will know this. In fact, he held the pole position record in Formula 1 for a very long time. I believe he achieved 65 pole positions in his career, and that was a record that was only just beaten by Michael Schumacher towards the end of his first stint in Formula 1 in 2006. That was a long time. Since then, Sir Lewis Hamilton has beaten it, but I still think that Senna is 3rd overall on the all-time standings, despite competing in far less Grand Prix than Sir Lewis and Schumacher. But the 1988 Monaco Grand Prix is one of the greatest laps in the history of Formula 1. It's since been known as the Lap of the Gods, and it's a crying shame that we don't have any footage of it. Unfortunately, there is no actual footage of it. The closest thing you can get to it is Murray Walker commentating on a virtual lap of the MP44 years later at Monaco. And thankfully that footage exists of that, but the actual footage of the lap is not there. But he qualified ahead of his teammate Alain Prost by 1.5 seconds, 1.5 seconds. Think about that. 1.5 seconds these days, that can cover the entire field in qualifying. That was the gap between 1st and 2nd. Now, qualifying gaps in general were a lot bigger back in the day than what they are now, but still, that is an almost unheard of margin in Formula 1. And it really showcased his skills as well. Senna would win the Monaco Grand Prix a record 6 times, a record that still stands to this day. Nobody has broken his Monaco win tally. So it's just an unbelievable. I mean, here's a quote I've got from him. He's just said the following on this lap at the time: "Suddenly I realised that I was no longer driving the car consciously, I was driving it by some kind of instinct, only I was in a different dimension. On that day I said to myself, that was the maximum for me, no room for anything more. I never really achieved that feeling again." Unbelievable. Literally incredible lap. And he did something similar in 1990 in Spain as well, years later. Now, during this Grand Prix, this was held at Jerez. This was before the days of Barcelona, and where they hold the motorcycle Grand Prix of Spain nowadays. Martin Donnelly, the Irish driver for the Lotus team, had a horrific crash during qualifying. It was actually, if you've seen footage of the aftermath of the crash, I hesitate to say it because it's just so haunting. He's just sort of sat there in his racing seat, but he's outside the car. He was thrown from it. Really horrible crash. But Senna, despite the it looked at the time that he might have passed away. Martin Donnelly, thankfully, he made it. But, it was a really bad crash back in the days when Formula 1 drivers. There was some real danger back then. But yeah, Senna, despite that, managed to pull off one of the best qualifying laps again. 1.2 seconds ahead of his teammate Gerhard Berger around the Jerez circuit. And given what happened, and there is footage of this one, they did make sure to get a camera on Senna's car for it, and he's dodging cars left, right and centre, trying to get through the corners as fast as possible. He was just full on attack mode. What a lap that was. It was just pure aggression, and it was beautiful to watch. But let's talk about his first World Championship here, because he didn't have it very easy in 1998. Like I said, that McLaren MP44 was the most dominant car in Formula 1 history, but his teammate Alain Prost was very much of a similar kind of level throughout the season. The points gap was not that much between them. Prost already a double world champion by this point. Senna in his first championship battle, having previously raced for the likes of Tolman and Lotus in previous seasons. And in the first of many Japanese Grand Prix title deciders in 1988, it was the 2 cars of McLaren on the front row of the grid, but Senna got a terrible start. He almost stole the car as a result, and dropped down to 14th place by the end of the first lap. but he recovered magnificently in slightly damp conditions. It started to rain a little bit, but it wasn't enough to actually go in and change tyres, and he won the race eventually and won his first World Championship too. And again, another very daring driver. He never gave up. He never gave up. You cannot write off Ayrton Senna. Even when there are not all the gears working correctly in his gearbox, just like was happening at his home race in 1991. Now, I've already gone in depth about this as one of the greatest Brazilian Grand Prix moments that's coming up, because the Brazilian Grand Prix is coming up this weekend, like I said at the start of the video. But yeah, his exploits during 1991, his first home race. He never won his home race before. Alain Prost traditionally dominated the Brazilian Grand Prix, but for him to win, despite the terrible weather conditions, despite having been stuck, I think, in 6th gear, I think it was, throughout most of the rest of the race, he managed to hold off Riccardo Patrese behind and win his home race in the most emotional circumstances. He was physically exhausted after the race. He had to be pulled from the car by the stewards. He couldn't lift the trophy above his head on the winner's podium. He had to give it a few attempts. That just shows you the physical effort. This was back in the day before power steering, manual gearboxes, 1,000 horsepower in the back of the car. Those cars were monsters, and to pilot it in 6th gear and keep it going and keep it competitive was absolutely magnificent. And the final one I want to highlight, 1992 Belgian Grand Prix qualifying. Eric Comas has a horrible crash at the Blanchimont corner coming up to the bus stop chicane. He hits the wall, he is knocked unconscious. He actually keeps his foot on the accelerator pedal though. Because of that, there was a real danger of the car bursting into flames, and therefore he probably would have died. He probably would have passed away as a result. Senna though, in his in his one of the greatest displays of sportsmanship, I think. I mean, I just have goosebumps and a lump in my throat, Murray Walker style. Just talking about it, he stopped his car out on track, ran across it while there was other cars coming. He could have easily got run over. These things are very quick Formula 1 cars, as we know. And he went to Eric Comas and he, got him out of there. He made sure he was all right. Stopped the engine running basically. And if it wasn't for that, the stewards wouldn't have got there till later on. So he could potentially saved his life. And Comas actually emotionally tried to do the same thing for him in 1994 at San Marino. Unfortunately, though, he was too late. But Eric Comas did try and go out on the track and save Senna, and tragically he was unable to do so. But yeah, Ayrton Senna, someone who is just just speaking about him, I get emotional, because there'll never be another Senna. There will never be another Ayrton Senna in Formula 1. There just won't. There will not be anybody like him ever again. And you see the amount of drivers that idolise him. I mean, this is why the Brazilian fans, I think, love Sir Lewis Hamilton so much, because he loves Brazil, he loves Ayrton Senna, and some of his drives over the years, particularly in 2021, was very Senna-esque to recover like he did, and to get the win, in a championship fight as well. So you look at all the drivers that idolise Senna, that tells you what a legend he was and how he's sorely missed and how he was gone too soon as well. But yeah, I'll probably do a more in-depth video about Ayrton Senna and why I think he's the best of all time. Maybe coming up to the anniversary of his passing at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix next year or something like that. But yeah, is Senna the greatest of all time in your opinion, guys? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, for much more F1 content in the build-up to the Brazilian Grand Prix, keep it tuned here to the F1Chronicle.com. Shout out to James Rees, he's done a fine piece that is focused on this, that I've based this video off of. Do go and check that out if you haven't already. Of course, head to F1Chronicle.com for plenty of articles on Formula 1. And yeah, have a good one, guys. We'll see you very soon.